Hey all, so here is the week 4 structures and functions of organs paper. This is a research paper, so you might spend a little bit of extra time on it just because you're really going to be diving deep. And you see we have the APA template, that's just the standard paper template, reference help, the rubric, and the video list that you're watching to. So let's go pop over to that rubric, and that's where we'll discuss all this gorgeousness, right? So let me pause it and pull that up. Okay. So here's the rubric. So it says identify an organism that lives within 50 miles of your home. If you have a different organism you want to do and it's not near your house, that is fine. It just makes it a little easier if you do it somewhere near your home. Then, just because you know familiarity, right? Write at least 50-word research paper on how the organism has adapted to survive their specific environment. Include the following points. Briefly describe the environment, temperature, landscape, food sources, etc., and describe the organism's role in the environment. This must be specific. So you can't say fish. You gotta give me like a genus species. If you're gonna do fish, it better be like, okay, all I can think of is a crab, the Dungeness crab. So if you're doing fish, do like the coho salmon and whatever the genus species is for that. I think it's something like Omycus, the O stands for something for the genus, and then Mycus is the species. Something like that. So very, very, very specific. And if you don't do that, if you just say fish instead of really specific, it's a 0 for this section. That's because to do the rest of this, it will really, really help if you have narrowed that sucker down. Okay? Identify the structures and functions of main organs found in your selected organism. So you're going to think like big traits, what do they do, what makes it unique. If I was talking about an elephant, I'd be talking about the trunk. If I'm talking about fish, I might be talking about streamlining and like that, the swim bladder. My brain decided. Determine which organism, your chosen organism, is most closely, I should say is. Determine which organism, your chosen organism, is most closely related to using a phylogenetic tree. Okay? So you're going to go use a phylogenetic tree, and that's probably like tree of life, something like that will give you an easy one. Explain how your chosen organism has evolved physically to become suited to its environment. 1, by comparing and contrasting it to that close relative. So if you're saying the closest relative to the elephant is the hydrix, then you would talk about the differences really briefly. Just, this could be a main component of this paragraph or a little less. And then 2 would be discussing the structures you already talked about, and then how those help your organism thrive where it lives. So the trunk and the elephant, how does that help it, So something like that. I would kind of mix the 2 up, start off with a little bit, and then say like, this is why it's awesome. Then explain how things would change if the organism were transplanted to a significantly different environment. Describe the new environment specifically. I need you to pick a specific place, a park, a city, a country, a lake, something where it could feasibly live. So your fish isn't going to live in the air, your elephant wouldn't live underwater. It's got to be something specific, like say I'm talking about, I got the elephant on the drugs, my brain. I'm talking about the elephant, so I'm going to move it to like Alaska because the woolly mammoths were there, and so maybe it could live there, and I'll talk about why it couldn't. So it's got to have like at least a chance in, hell to live. Would their organ system still be as efficient? Why or why not? So whatever you talked about before, so would the trunk still work there? Yay, Would the organism survive in its new environment? Why or why not? And you might want to use the prompts as headings, but you would reword them, right? So when you use the whole briefly describe the environment, you say environment. Or you say, savanna. If you're doing elephant. For the fish, you might say Washington rivers if you did a salmon. And you're going to include in here a diagram with your structures labeled and any other appropriate information into there, okay? And these references, you'll have an in-text citation for the picture under it, and then a full reference in your reference section. Review the help on that in the week 2 assignment blog, because that goes into, shows you remember how to do a figure and a table. And then you need at least 3 references in format, no first person point of view, so no I, you, we, my, our, whatever. And then you submit it. So they mention how to use the rubric. So if you've noticed up here, there's like 4 points on the second section, and there is 2, 4, 6 points on the top section. So that means you're going to have more on this higher stuff and a little less here in your paper. So this section should be longer and this section is shorter, but pretty close. I mean, it's not too far off. Is anything weighed equally? Use headings. Try to make any easy points. Easy points would be including that diagram and mentioning the bad boy. So here we go. We tell you some, like, is it a predator? Is it a I guess I should read it. So environment and role. So you're going to think, where does it live? Let me pause. Sorry about that. I have learned that if you want everyone to call you or text you, you should just make a video. Okay, so environment and role. So we're just talk about where does it live, what is it like there, discuss these points in the relevant, discuss points that will be relevant in the evolution section. So if I say it's a monkey and it lives in a forest, then in the structures, I'm going to talk about how it has really long arms. And then in the evolution, I'm going to say that helps it swing from tree to tree, right? And then is it a predator, a producer, a scavenger, an herbivore, a specialist, a generalist? What is its role? So if it's a specialist, it eats one specific thing. If it's a generalist, it eats everything. That will just make life easier later on. Structures, what are the neat organs, adaptations that your organism has, right? So you're an anteater, you have a really long tongue. Your tapir, you have that, not a trunk, but you still have really, cool snout that moves around. Diagram, you need to have it in your paper and you want to talk about it. So I would probably put it in the structures section, and then I would say, like, as seen above or as seen below, something like that. I just need a mention of the figure. So I would say, as seen in the figure above, as seen in the figure below, at least once, because you don't want to have something in your paper that you don't talk about. Evolution, explain how the organism in the diagram, and you notice before equal points, 2 equal. So this one's a lot less on the physiology. Explain how the organism in the diagram has evolved physiologically to become suited to its native environment. Determine which organism, your chosen organism, is most closely related to by using the phylogenetic tree. So you're going to discuss the closest relative in your tree, then explain how your chosen organism is different to that, and then talk about the structures. So how does having organ Q help it live in its home as a predator, scavenger, herbivore, etc., like we talked about before. And then here I might be tempted to combine this with the previous section, just because it might be fun. It just depends. Because you could say, if you combined it, you might talk about the tree first, but you could say, like, hey, my rabbit has big ears to help it hear things so it can be safe. It's closely related to the whatever. We'll say it's closely related to, they're like weird. So they're not rodentia. I'm not sure what they're closely related to. Let's say they are closely related to chipmunk, because this is total BS. I say those don't have them, so that's why the rabbits are swifter or something like that. And then transplant. So here you need to pick that specific place if their organs would work. So if I move my rabbits to somewhere that they're not, Antarctica, then, if I move a jackrabbit there, its organ is going to be too cold. So it will croak, right? Or it could be somewhere good. In that case, if I did rabbits, it would totally be Australia, and I would talk about the past and how that happened, because I wouldn't be able to resist it. But you can do a hypothetical case, and it's probably the easiest. So there are at least 3 references. Make sure they match. We do 100 level requirements, introduction, conclusion, and it's going to be a point for your thesis. So make sure you have it. Okay, so then we have the how I would approach this assignment. You don't have to do it this way. This is how I would do it. So what adaptations are and how natural selection selects them, and then evolution. That would be my big picture. I would briefly describe my own genus species. So if I pick, let's say my genus species is Gato Azul, so a blue cat. I've made it up. That's all. then I would talk about that briefly in there. Like an example of this is the gato azul, because it's blue and pretty. And I would have a thesis statement like the gato azul has evolved many adaptations such as blue hair, thick coat, ability to meow on command that enable it to thrive in its native niche. I don't know why that would help, it's whatever. But, and then A, so if you are doing something that is more of a generalist, you would say, but to become, they can not only thrive, but it would become invasive and introduce environments. If you are doing something that is a specialist, so it won't live, due to its specialist nature, it will die outside its native environment. So it depends on what you're doing, right? And so then I would do a section on the environment and role, and this would be like a paragraph on where it lives in the environment, and then a paragraph or so on its role. That's how it affects the ecosystem, what it eats, what eats it, etc. Structures and functions, the cool things. If I do a star-nosed mole, I'm going to talk about that nose. If I do a dog, might be the sense of smell. If I do a plant, like I do a kazoo, its ability to just take over the entire world. If I do algae, what am I going to do? I would stay away from bacteria in this, and if you're going to do anything, go more with plants and animals. Plants are super cool. Very few people do them. It'd be cool to see more. But if you feel more comfortable like most people do, there's definitely an animal bias. Totally fine. Evolution, so what's my organism closely related to, and then how the cool traits that help it, and how it's too bad the loser relative does not have those traits in the hood. And new environment, where it could live, how its traits work there, how it's derived. My conclusion, if I think it's a specialist, is going to be, I would bring it back to the big picture by talking about how climate change is changing its native environment to the point that it will not be able to survive in the future. If I think it's a generalist, I'm going to talk about how the global economy and all this trading is going to enable this species to take over the world and become invasive and become an issue. Okay, you can come up with something totally different, that's fine. This is where my brain went. That does not mean that's where your brain has to go. It's just a suggestion. And then I'm so used to having a reference section at the bottom. Like, where's my reference section? Oh yeah, this is an outline. Okay, and as always, this is an outline. So if you were doing actual headings, you wouldn't have an introduction because your title heading would take that place. It would be centered. You would have the centered. You would have actual paragraphs with no little tabs. This is just my mental outline to help you get started. I'm not writing the paper for you, So what I would probably do, the first thing, an organism, if there's no organism that calls for you, I would just, maybe like Google cool animals in the national park that's near me, and then I would see if I can find a diagram. In terms of the diagram, let me talk about that for a little bit. If you do an animal, there's a big chance that you won't have a diagram of your specific animal, but you can probably find one of the family. So maybe I do the snowshoe hare. Then I may not find that one, but I could probably find one of a rabbit. If I did a gecko, I can probably find one of a lizard. If I did, a scorpion, a specific one, I can probably find a general one. So just work your way out until you can find that. If you have a hard time finding a diagram, let me know and I will help you find one. It doesn't have to be too specific. It doesn't need like the entire intestines labeled in every system. If it does the external traits, that's good enough. I just need a picture that has stuff labeled. If you can't find anything and you want to, some students like to take a photo that they found and then use Word to make the labels on the photo. That's a little bit more of a pain in the butt, but you can do that. You could even print the photo out, write it all in hand neatly, and then take a picture of it and put that in, as long as it's neat and clear. But I would probably just go for a more general. So like if I was doing a specific wolf, I'd probably have to go to just wolves. If I'm doing, probably find a bat. Usually the general terms you can find, like I might not be able to find my salmon, but I could probably find a fish diagram. So you still be specific in the rest of the paper. You would just say this is a diagram of a lizard that corresponds to my house gecko in terms of structures, and that's good enough, as seen in figure 1 kind of thing. Okay, so I hope that helps. Send me drafts. Love to see them.